The first time Hannah Barrett saw her sister's face twist with false sympathy while telling the shopkeeper that Hannah could not be trusted with change. Something inside her cracked open like a prairie egg under the merciless Arkansas sun. It was 1878, and Bentonville had grown from a muddy crossroads into a proper town with wooden sidewalks and glass windows that caught the afternoon light. But none of that mattered when your own blood stood before the whole community and painted you as simple-minded. "Poor dear cannot count past 10, Lenora Barrett said, her voice dripping with manufactured concern as she placed coins on the counter at Wilkinson's general store. "Our mother, God rest her soul, always said Hannah needed special care. The fever she had as a child, you understand." There had been no fever. Hannah remembered her childhood with perfect clarity, remembered learning to read from her father's newspapers, remembered doing the household accounts when her mother's hands grew too arthritic to hold a pencil. But Lenora had always been beautiful, had always known how to make people believe whatever story suited her purposes. And after their parents died within a year of each other, Lenora's word became the only truth that mattered. Hannah stood behind her sister, her plain brown dress dusty from the walk into town, her dark blonde hair pulled back in a simple braid that hung between her shoulder blades. She kept her eyes lowered, as Lenora had trained her to do, and said nothing. Speaking only made things worse. Lenora would interrupt, would correct, would shake her head sadly and apologize for her poor sister's confusion. The shopkeeper, a balding man named Ernest Wilkinson, nodded with exaggerated slowness, the way people did when they thought you could not understand regular speech. "Of course, Miss Barrett, you are a saint to care for her so devotedly." Saint. Hannah bit the inside of her cheek hard enough to taste copper. Lenora cared for her the way a farmer cared for a mule, keeping her fed and sheltered in exchange for labor. Hannah did the washing, the cooking, the mending, the garden work, and the endless scrubbing that kept their small house on the edge of town presentable. Lenora did the socializing, the church-going, and the careful management of their parents' modest inheritance, which she controlled completely. They left the store with their purchases, and Hannah carried the heavy basket while Lenora walked ahead, her green silk dress swishing in a way that made men turn their heads. 3 years older than Hannah's 21 years, Lenora had been courted by half the eligible men in Benton County, but none had proven wealthy enough or prestigious enough to satisfy her ambitions. "You will not speak when we get home," Lenora said without turning around. "I have invited Reverend Clark and his wife for supper, and you will serve the meal in complete silence. If you embarrass me, there will be consequences." Hannah said nothing. There were always consequences. Sometimes Lenora withheld meals. Sometimes she locked Hannah in the root cellar overnight. Once, she had burned the only photograph Hannah had of their mother, holding it to the lamp flame while Hannah watched, helpless and heartsick. The walk back to their house took 20 minutes through the growing heat of late June. Arkansas summers were brutal, humid, and thick, making every breath feel like swallowing hot cotton. By the time they reached the small white house with its sagging porch, sweat had plastered Hannah's dress to her back. She spent the afternoon preparing chicken and dumplings, green beans from the garden, and an apple pie made from their dwindling supply of preserved fruit. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, chopping and stirring and rolling out dough while Lenora changed into an even finer dress upstairs. Through the kitchen window, Hannah could see their neighbors' horses in the pasture beyond, running free in a way she had not felt since childhood. The Reverend and Mrs. Clark arrived promptly at 6, and Hannah served the meal exactly as instructed, silent as a ghost, while Lenora entertained with stories and laughter. Mrs. Clark, a thin woman with kind eyes, kept glancing at Hannah with something that might have been pity or might have been suspicion. Hannah could never tell anymore. "Your sister is very quiet," Mrs. Clark observed during dessert. "Hannah's mind works differently than ours," Lenora said smoothly. "She understands simple instructions, but conversation confuses her." The doctor in Little Rock said it is best not to overtax her faculties. There had been no doctor in Little Rock. Lenora had never taken Hannah to see any doctor. But Mrs. Clark nodded sympathetically, and Reverend Clark launched into a story about a distant cousin with similar afflictions, and Hannah stood in the corner of the dining room, holding a pitcher of water, invisible and silent, and burning with rage that had nowhere to go. After the guests departed, Lenora inspected the kitchen with the scrutiny of a general reviewing troops. She found fault with the way Hannah had scrubbed the cast iron skillet, and made her do it again 3 times before allowing her to climb the narrow stairs to the tiny room under the eaves where she slept. Hannah lay on her thin mattress in the darkness, listening to the house settle and creak around her. Through the single small window, she could see stars scattered across the sky like spilled salt, distant and unreachable. She had a book hidden beneath a loose floorboard, a collection of poetry by Emily Dickinson that she had found in her mother's trunk. Reading it by moonlight was dangerous. If Lenora discovered it, she would burn it like she had burned the photograph. But Hannah read anyway, needing the words like air, needing proof that somewhere beyond this prison of lies, minds like hers existed and thrived. The next morning dawned hot and cloudless, promising another scorching day. Hannah was already in the kitchen when Lenora descended, already had coffee brewed and biscuits baking. Lenora ate without comment, then announced she would be spending the day at the church organizing a charity bazaar. "You will go to Miller's ranch and collect the eggs I ordered," Lenora said. "Do not dawdle, and do not attempt to purchase anything else. I have counted every cent in your pocket, and I will know if you have been dishonest." The Miller Ranch lay 3 miles west of town, and Hannah welcomed the long walk despite the heat. Being outside, away from Lenora's constant surveillance, felt like unclenching a fist that had been closed for years. She followed the rutted wagon road, her bonnet shading her face, watching hawks circle overhead and thinking about freedom. The ranch came into view around mid-morning, a sprawling operation with cattle dotting the hills and a large barn that looked newly painted. She had been here twice before on similar errands, had always dealt with Mrs. Miller, a no-nonsense woman who ran the business side of the operation while her husband and sons handled the livestock. But today, Mrs. Miller was not in the barn where the eggs were kept. Instead, a man Hannah had never seen before stood near the chicken coops, repairing a section of fence. He straightened as she approached, and she found herself looking at someone who made her forget to breathe for a moment. He was tall, probably 6 feet, with dark hair that needed cutting and sharp blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His face was tanned from outdoor work, with strong features that stopped just short of handsome. He wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy, denim trousers and a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal muscled forearms. Something about the way he moved suggested capability, the kind of easy competence that came from years of hard physical labor. "Help you, miss?" he asked, his voice a low drawl that carried the accent of someone who had grown up speaking English and Spanish in equal measure. Hannah opened her mouth, then remembered Lenora's instructions to speak as little as possible in public. People talked, and anything she said could get back to her sister. She pulled the paper with Lenora's order from her pocket and held it out silently. The man took it, read it quickly, then looked back at her with those unsettlingly observant eyes. "You are here for the eggs. I am Tyler Winters. Started working here last week. Mrs. Miller is up at the house, but I can get your order ready." She nodded, still silent. He did not move toward the barn. Instead, he studied her in a way that made her nervous. Not the way men usually looked at Lenora, with appreciation or desire, but with something more like curiosity. "You are one of the Barrett sisters," he said. "Saw you both in town a few days back." Hannah nodded again, uncomfortable with the conversation. She gestured toward the barn, hoping he would just get the eggs so she could leave. "Folks say you do not talk much," Tyler said conversationally, finally moving toward the barn. She followed, her shoes crunching on the dusty ground. "Say you have some trouble with thinking." Heat flooded her face, the familiar shame that Lenora's lies always produced. She kept her eyes down, waiting. "Thing is," Tyler continued, opening the barn door and leading her into the relative cool of the interior, "I do not think that is true." Her head snapped up in surprise. He was watching her again, and this time she saw something in his expression that made her heart pound. Recognition. Understanding. The way someone looks when they have just solved a puzzle. "Saw you reading that order before you handed it to me," he said quietly, moving to where crates of eggs were stacked on straw. "Read it quick, too, upside down from your perspective. And when your sister was talking to Wilkinson in the store, I noticed you counting change in your head. Your lips were moving just slightly, doing the mathematics. Got the right answer about 3 seconds before Wilkinson did." Hannah's hands trembled. She wanted to speak, wanted to confirm what he was saying, but fear held her tongue. This could be a trap. Maybe Tyler Winters was friends with someone who knew Lenora. Maybe this was some kind of test. He packed eggs carefully into a basket lined with cloth, his movements gentle despite his size. "I grew up with 5 sisters," he said, "youngest of 6 children. My oldest sister, Isabel, she was the smartest person I ever met. Could have been a teacher or a lawyer if she had been born a man. But my father, he did not like smart women, said they were unnatural. Started telling people Isabel was touched in the head, kept her close to home, worked her like a servant." Hannah's breath caught. She stared at him, and he met her gaze steadily. "Isabel got out eventually," Tyler said. "Married a shop owner in Santa Fe who appreciated her mind. She helps him run the business now, does all the bookkeeping and inventory. Last I heard, they were doing real well." He paused, securing the basket. "Point is, I know what it looks like when someone is being kept down on purpose. And I know the difference between a woman who cannot think and a woman who is not allowed to." For a long moment, Hannah stood frozen, years of caution warring with desperate hope. Then, very quietly, she spoke. "If you tell anyone, my sister will make my life unbearable." Her voice came out rusty from disuse in public, but clear and articulate. Tyler's expression did not change except for a slight nod, as if she had just confirmed something he already knew. "I do not carry tales," he said. "Your secrets are safe with me. Why would you help me?" Hannah asked, the words tumbling out now that she had started. "You do not know me." "Because it is the right thing to do," Tyler said simply. "And because I watched you in that store, saw the way you kept yourself small and silent while your sister took credit for your existence. I know what that costs a person." He handed her the basket of eggs. "You are smarter than most men I have met, I would wager. Certainly smarter than Ernest Wilkinson and probably smarter than me. Seems a waste to keep all that locked away." Hannah took the basket, her hand still shaking slightly. "I have to go. If I am gone too long, she gets suspicious." "Come back whenever you need to," Tyler said. "If you want to talk or just want somewhere to be yourself for a while, I am here every day except Sunday." She should have said no. Should have protected herself by refusing the offer, by keeping the walls high and thick. But instead, she found herself nodding, some part of her unfurling like a flower that had been kept in darkness too long. The walk back to town felt different. The sun seemed less oppressive, the dust less choking. Hannah carried the basket of eggs carefully, but her mind raced ahead, cataloging everything Tyler had said, the way he had looked at her, the possibility he represented. She had no illusions about romance. She was plain where Lenora was beautiful, awkward where her sister was graceful. But Tyler had seen her. Actually seen her, past the lies and the reputation, down to the truth underneath. That alone felt like magic. Lenora inspected the eggs with her usual critical eye but found no fault. The rest of the day passed in typical fashion, with chores and silence and the suffocating weight of pretense. But that night, lying in her attic room with moonlight streaming through the window, Hannah allowed herself to hope for the first time in years. Over the following weeks, Hannah found reasons to visit Miller's ranch with increasing frequency. Lenora, absorbed in her social climbing and church activities, barely noticed. She sent Hannah on errands, and Hannah discovered that the Millers needed all manner of things delivered or collected. Each visit gave her time with Tyler, stolen moments in the barn or the pasture or the shade of the cottonwood trees that lined the creek running through the property. They talked about everything. Tyler told her about growing up in New Mexico territory, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the father he had not spoken to in 5 years, and the mother who had died when he was 14. He had worked ranches from Texas to Colorado, saving money with no clear plan beyond staying free and unencumbered. Hannah, more cautiously, told him about her life, about her parents, who had been good people, maybe too trusting of their eldest daughter, about the slow process by which Lenora had isolated her, spread rumors, built the cage bar by bar until escape seemed impossible. Why not just leave? Tyler asked one afternoon as they sat by the creek, the water rushing past their feet while Hannah's shoes dried on the bank after she had waded in to cool off. "Where would I go?" Hannah asked. "I have no money. Lenora controls everything. And even if I could leave, the whole county thinks I am simple-minded. Who would hire me? Who would believe my side of the story?" "I believe it," Tyler said. "You are one person. Could be that is enough to start with." He picked up a smooth stone, turned it over in his hand. "Mrs. Miller knows you are not slow. She told me she always thought there was something strange about how your sister talked about you versus how you actually behaved." Hope and fear tangled in Hannah's chest. "What did you tell her?" "Told her what I observed. She is a fair woman, does not suffer fools or liars." Tyler skipped the stone across the water, where it bounced 3 times before sinking. "Said she would be willing to offer you a job if you wanted one. Room and board included. House staff work mostly, but also helping with the books during busy seasons. She says her handwriting is getting shaky and her eyes are not what they used to be." Hannah stared at him. "You asked her to hire me, asked if she would be willing. The offer is real, but you would have to be the one to take it." He met her eyes, his expression serious. "I know it is frightening. I know your sister will make trouble, but staying with her is going to destroy you eventually. I can see it happening already." He was right, and Hannah knew it. She had felt herself shrinking over the years, becoming smaller and quieter, until sometimes she feared she would disappear entirely. But the thought of confronting Lenora, of asserting her independence, made her stomach churn with anxiety. "Let me think about it," she said finally. Tyler nodded, accepting her hesitation without judgment. "Take all the time you need." But time, as it turned out, was not a luxury Hannah would have. 3 days later, Lenora came home from town in a fury. She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows and called for Hannah with a sharpness that sent ice down her spine. Hannah emerged from the kitchen, where she had been starting dinner, her hands still damp from washing vegetables. "What is wrong? What is wrong?" Lenora's face was flushed with rage, her eyes glittering dangerously. "Meredith Clark told me she saw you talking at the Miller Ranch. Talking, Hannah. Having a conversation with that cowboy who works there. She said you were laughing." The bottom dropped out of Hannah's world. She had been careful, had thought the creek was secluded enough, but clearly someone had seen. "I was just— Do not lie to me." Lenora advanced, and Hannah instinctively stepped back. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" "I have spent years building a reputation, establishing us in this community. If people think you have been deceiving them, they will turn on both of us." "I have not deceived anyone," Hannah said, finding courage in desperation. "You are the one who has been lying. I never claimed to be slow-minded." "You invented that story to control me." The slap came fast, catching Hannah across the cheek hard enough to snap her head sideways. She stumbled against the wall, hand flying to her face, tears springing to her eyes from shock and pain. "You ungrateful wretch," Lenora hissed. "I've given you a home, food, clothing. I could have turned you out after Mother and Father died. I could have sent you to an asylum. Instead, I kept you with me, and this is how you repay my kindness. Your kindness." Hannah's voice rose despite her fear. "You have made me a prisoner. You have stolen my inheritance, my reputation, my life." "I have protected you," Lenora said coldly, "from yourself and your own stupidity, but clearly I have been too lenient." She grabbed Hannah's arm, her fingers digging in painfully. "You will not leave this house again except under my direct supervision. You will not speak to anyone, especially not that cowboy. And if you ever contradict me again, I will have you committed. Do you understand? I will tell the judge you have become dangerous, and they will lock you away where you can cause no more trouble." She meant it. Hannah could see the calculation in her sister's eyes, the willingness to do whatever was necessary to maintain her control and her reputation. Fighting back would only make things worse. "I understand," Hannah whispered. Lenora released her with a shove. "Go to your room. You will stay there until I decide you can be trusted again." Hannah climbed the stairs on shaking legs, her cheek throbbing where Lenora had struck her. She heard the click of the lock after her sister closed the door from the outside. The room had no lock on the interior, but Lenora had installed a bolt on the hallway side years ago for exactly this purpose. She was trapped. For 2 days, Hannah remained locked in her attic room. Lenora brought meals, meager portions of bread and water, barely enough to sustain her. The June heat turned the small space into an oven, and Hannah spent hours lying on the floor near the window, trying to catch any breath of air. On the 3rd morning, she woke to the sound of voices downstairs. Male voices, which was unusual. Lenora rarely entertained men when Hannah was locked away. She pressed her ear to the floor, trying to hear. "I assure you my sister is fine," Lenora was saying, her voice carrying that false sweetness she used with outsiders. "She caught a summer fever and needs rest. The doctor advised isolation." "Funny thing about that," came Tyler's voice, and Hannah's heart leaped. "Because I was just talking to Doc Harrison, and he said he has not been called out to your house in over a year." Silence. Then Lenora, icier now. "How dare you question me in my own home? Leave immediately, or I will have the sheriff remove you." "Already talked to the sheriff, too," Tyler said calmly. "Told him some concerning things about how your sister has been treated. He suggested I check on her welfare. So here I am with Deputy Morris as witness. We would like to see Hannah. She is sleeping. Then we will wait until she wakes." More silence. Hannah scrambled to her feet, rushed to the door, and pounded on it with both fists. "I am up here," she shouted. "Tyler, I am locked in." The sound of footsteps thundering up the stairs, then Tyler's voice right outside her door. "Hannah, are you hurt? The door is bolted from outside," she called back. "She has kept me locked up for 3 days." She heard cursing, the sound of wood splintering, then the door crashed open. Tyler filled the doorway, Deputy Morris right behind him. Both men took in the scene with hardening expressions: the sweltering heat, the thin mattress, the bucket in the corner that served as a chamber pot, Hannah's face still showing the faint bruise from Lenora's slap. "Madam, you need to come with us," Deputy Morris said, his voice tight with controlled anger. He was an older man, someone Hannah recognized from church, who had always treated her with the exaggerated patience reserved for children and the simple-minded. Now he looked at her with clear eyes, really seeing her for perhaps the first time. Hannah nodded, not trusting her voice. Tyler held out his hand and she took it, letting him help her down the stairs. Her legs were weak from days of inactivity and insufficient food. Lenora stood in the parlor, her face white with fury. "You have no right to take her. She is my sister, my responsibility." "Your responsibility had bruises and was locked in a room without adequate food or water," Deputy Morris said flatly. "Sheriff Daniels wants to speak with both of you. Now." The walk to the sheriff's office felt surreal. Hannah, dizzy from heat and hunger, leaned on Tyler's arm while Deputy Morris kept a firm grip on Lenora, who had lapsed into icy silence. Townspeople stopped to stare, whispering behind their hands, and Hannah saw the exact moment when Lenora's carefully constructed reputation began to crumble. Sheriff Daniels was a stern man with gray hair and a mustache that drooped past his chin. He listened to Tyler's account, then asked Hannah directly, "Miss Barrett, can you tell me in your own words what has been happening in your home?" Hannah glanced at Lenora, saw the warning in her sister's eyes, and felt the old fear rise up. Then she looked at Tyler, standing against the wall with his arms crossed, his expression encouraging, and something inside her solidified into steel. She told the truth. All of it. The years of lies, the isolation, the stolen inheritance, the physical punishments. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, shedding the halting speech pattern she had adopted in public. She saw understanding dawn on Sheriff Daniels' face, saw him looking at her not as a simple-minded girl but as a credible witness. When she finished, Lenora laughed. It was a cold, brittle sound. "You cannot possibly believe her. She is mentally deficient. Everyone knows it. Ask anyone in town." "I have been asking," Sheriff Daniels said quietly. "And the more I ask, the more I am hearing that people saw you keep your sister isolated, that you always spoke for her, that you controlled every aspect of her life. That is not caring for someone. That is imprisonment." "I want access to our parents' will," Hannah said suddenly, surprised by her own boldness. "I want to see the legal documents regarding the inheritance." Lenora's face went even paler. "That is none of your concern. I manage our finances." "If Hannah is mentally incompetent, there should be legal guardianship papers," Sheriff Daniels said. "Let me guess there are none, because you knew you could not get a judge to declare her incompetent. You just told everyone she was and counted on people accepting your word." The silence that followed was answer enough. It took another week to untangle the full extent of Lenora's deceptions. The lawyer who had handled their parents' estate was horrified to learn how Lenora had misrepresented things. The will had split everything equally between the sisters. Hannah was entitled to half of the house, half of the remaining money, and half of their mother's jewelry, which Lenora had been wearing or selling for years. The community, confronted with evidence of Lenora's cruelty, turned on her with the same speed they had once accepted her lies. Suddenly, no one wanted to associate with the woman who had abused and imprisoned her own sister. Lenora's social standing evaporated like morning dew under the summer sun, Through it all, Tyler remained steady at Hannah's side. Not pushing, not demanding anything, just present and supportive as she navigated her sudden freedom. Mrs. Miller gave her the promised job, and Hannah moved into a small but comfortable room in the ranch house, where she helped with cooking, cleaning, and increasingly with the business accounts that Mrs. Miller found more difficult each season. "You have a gift for figures, Mrs. Miller said one evening, watching Hannah reconcile the month's expenses. "Never seen anyone work through numbers so fast." Hannah looked up from the ledger, a smile playing at her lips. "My father taught me. He said a good mind was a gift from God and should not be wasted." "Your father was a wise man. It is a shame his eldest daughter did not learn that lesson." Mrs. Miller patted Hannah's shoulder. "You have a place here as long as you want it, dear. You have more than earned your keep." The following Sunday, Tyler asked Hannah to go riding with him. She had learned to ride as a child, before Lenora had forbidden it as too dangerous for someone with limited mental capacity, and the skill came back quickly. They rode out to the far pasture, where the land rolled away in all directions under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. "How are you doing?" Tyler asked as they dismounted near a cluster of oak trees that provided blessed shade. "Really doing, I mean." Hannah considered the question seriously. "I feel like I have been underwater for years, and I am just now learning to breathe again. It is wonderful and terrifying at the same time." "That makes sense." Tyler leaned against a tree, his hat pushed back on his head. "Big changes usually are both those things." "I never thanked you properly," Hannah said, "for seeing me, for believing me, for helping me get out. You do not need to thank me for basic human decency." "Maybe not, but I want to anyway." She moved closer, her heart pounding with nervousness and hope and feelings she barely knew how to name. "You saved my life, Tyler. Not in a dramatic way, maybe, but in all the ways that matter. I was disappearing, and you reminded me I existed." He straightened, and she saw something shift in his expression. "Hannah, I know I am not pretty like Lenora," she said quickly, needing to get the words out before courage failed her. "I know I am awkward and strange and probably too direct, but I wanted you to know that I care for you, deeply. And if there is any chance you might feel the same way, I would very much like to explore that possibility." For a moment that felt like an eternity, Tyler just looked at her. Then he smiled, really smiled in a way that transformed his face. "Hannah Barrett, you are about 10 times smarter than me, and I mean that as a compliment. You noticed I have been falling in love with you since the first time you spoke to me in that barn, right?" Her breath caught. "You have. How could I not?" He reached out, gently touching her cheek where the bruise had long since faded. "You are brave and brilliant and kind despite everything you have been through. You are also beautiful, though I suspect you have been told otherwise so many times you cannot see it, but I see it. I see you." Hannah kissed him before she could think better of it, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. He made a surprised sound, then wrapped his arms around her and kissed her back with a tenderness that made tears spring to her eyes. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Tyler rested his forehead against hers. "I do not have much to offer you. I am just a cowboy who has been drifting most of his life. But I will never lie to you, never try to make you smaller than you are, and I will spend every day trying to be worthy of your trust." "That is everything," Hannah whispered. "That is more than I ever thought I would have." They courted properly after that, though they both knew where it was heading. Mrs. Miller, a romantic beneath her gruff exterior, gave them her blessing. Hannah wrote to Tyler's sister Isabel in Santa Fe, and received back a warm letter welcoming her to the family and offering advice on how to deal with the lingering effects of systematic belittlement. Lenora, meanwhile, sold the house in town and moved to Little Rock. She left without saying goodbye to Hannah, which hurt less than Hannah expected. Some relationships could not be salvaged, and perhaps it was better to let them die cleanly. 5 months after Tyler had first burst through that locked door, he and Hannah were married in a simple ceremony at the Miller Ranch. Mrs. Miller cried happy tears. Deputy Morris attended, along with half the town, most of whom seemed genuinely pleased to see Hannah claiming her own life. The Reverend Clark, who had initially believed Lenora's lies but had since apologized profusely, performed the ceremony. Hannah wore a dress she had made herself, pale blue with white lace at the collar, and carried wildflowers from the pasture. When Tyler said his vows, his voice was steady and sure, promising love and partnership in equal measure. When Hannah said hers, she felt years of silence breaking open into speech, into truth, into the kind of joy she had almost forgotten was possible. They moved into a small cabin on the Miller property, which came with Tyler's promotion to ranch foreman. It was 1 room plus a loft, simple and clean, with a view of the creek where they had first really talked. Hannah kept working on the books for Mrs. Miller while also helping Tyler manage the ranch's daily operations. She discovered she had a talent for organization and planning, for seeing patterns and solving problems that others missed. "You could have run a business," Tyler said one night as they lay in bed, the autumn wind rattling the windows. "If you had been born a man or born 20 years later, you could have been anything." "I am content with this," Hannah said, and meant it. "I have work that challenges me, people who respect me, and you. That is more than enough." He pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "You deserve the world. I have my world right here." The first winter of their marriage was harsh, with ice storms that knocked down fences and a cold snap that killed several head of cattle. They worked side by side through it all, Hannah proving herself capable of ranch work when needed, Tyler proving himself willing to discuss and debate rather than simply dictate. They argued sometimes, as all couples did, but they also talked through problems like partners, neither one assuming superiority. Spring brought new calves, and the discovery that Hannah was pregnant. She told Tyler over breakfast, watching his face cycle through surprise, joy, and sudden anxiety. "Are you scared?" he asked, taking her hand. "Terrified," Hannah admitted, "but also excited. We will figure it out together." "Together," he agreed, squeezing her fingers. "Always together." Their son was born in December of 1879, a healthy baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's sharp, observant eyes. They named him James, after Hannah's father. Mrs. Miller declared him the finest baby in Arkansas, and promptly began spoiling him with hand-knitted blankets and carved wooden toys. Hannah took to motherhood with the same fierce intelligence she brought to everything else. She read every book she could find on child rearing, questioned doctors when their advice did not make sense, and trusted her instincts when knowledge failed. Tyler was a devoted father, walking the floor with James when he cried at night, changing diapers without complaint, singing Spanish lullabies he remembered from his own childhood. As James grew from infant to toddler to small boy, Hannah watched him carefully for signs of curiosity, of intelligence, of the quick mind she recognized from her own reflection. Tyler taught him to ride. Hannah taught him to read before he was 4. Together, they taught him that thinking and questioning and learning were not just acceptable but admirable. "He is going to be smarter than both of us put together," Tyler said one evening, watching James laboriously sound out words from a primer. "Good," Hannah said firmly. "Let him be exactly as smart as he is capable of being. We will never make him feel less than." Tyler pulled her close, kissing her temple. "Never." 2 years after James came Sarah, named for Tyler's mother. She had her mother's blonde hair and her father's easy smile. Where James was serious and contemplative, Sarah was bold and adventurous, climbing everything and exploring with fearless enthusiasm. Hannah and Tyler learned to parent two very different children, adapting their approach to fit each unique personality. The years passed in the way years do on a ranch, marked by seasons and cattle drives and the slow accumulation of small improvements. Tyler and Hannah saved their money carefully, and when Mr. Miller died unexpectedly in 1883, they were able to buy a portion of the ranch from Mrs. Miller, who was ready to scale back but not retire entirely. Suddenly, they were landowners with their own small herd and big dreams. Hannah proved herself an excellent businesswoman, negotiating prices with buyers and managing accounts with meticulous precision. Tyler handled the practical aspects of ranching, but major decisions were made together, usually over coffee at their kitchen table after the children were asleep. They disagreed sometimes, but they had learned to hear each other out, to compromise when possible and defer when necessary. The community, which had once dismissed Hannah as simple-minded, now sought her advice on everything from contract negotiations to dispute resolution. She served on the church finance committee, helped establish a lending library in town, and quietly assisted several women who came to her with stories eerily similar to her own. More than once, Tyler came home to find another woman in their kitchen, sharing coffee and quiet conversation while Hannah listened and offered counsel. "You have become the person you needed when you were trapped," Tyler observed after one such visit. Hannah considered this. "Maybe that is how it works. We survive, and then we help others survive. Seems like the least we can do." In 1885, Lenora wrote asking for money. The letter was cold and perfunctory, mentioning debts and difficulties without apology or acknowledgement of past wrongs. Hannah read it twice, then burned it in the stove. Some wounds healed with time, but some people simply were not capable of change. She chose to focus on the family she had built rather than the sister she had lost. By 1887, the ranch was thriving. James was 8, already reading books meant for children twice his age, and pestering his parents with endless questions about how things worked. Sarah was 6, more interested in horses than books, but showing signs of her mother's mathematical aptitude when it came to counting and sorting. Mrs. Miller, now in her 70s, had moved into town but visited often, delighting in watching the family she had helped foster flourish. One evening in late summer, Hannah and Tyler sat on the porch of their expanded house, watching the sun set over land they owned. James and Sarah were supposed to be washing up for bed, but were actually catching fireflies in the gathering dusk, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Tyler asked, his arm around Hannah's shoulders. "Sometimes," Hannah admitted. "If you had not seen me, if you had not bothered to look past what everyone said, I would still be in that house, still be disappearing piece by piece." "I think you would have found a way out eventually," Tyler said. "You are too strong to be kept down forever." Hannah shook her head. "I was strong because you helped me remember I had strength. We save each other, Tyler. That is what love does." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, tasting of the coffee they had shared and the life they had built. When they broke apart, Sarah was making exaggerated gagging sounds while James rolled his eyes with the superiority of an older sibling. "Come here, you two," Hannah called, and they came running, climbing onto the porch and into their parents' arms. For a moment, they all sat together in a tangle of limbs and love, watching the sky fade from gold to purple to deep blue. Hannah thought about the girl she had been, silent and small, convinced she deserved nothing more than the cage Lenora had built. She thought about the moment Tyler had looked at her with recognition instead of pity. She thought about every step of the journey that had led here to this porch, this family, this life. "I am so glad you saw me," she whispered to Tyler. He smiled, pulling her closer. "I am so glad you let me." The years continued their steady march forward, bringing the challenges and joys that filled any life. The ranch survived droughts and harsh winters. The children grew, developing into individuals with their own dreams and ambitions. James eventually went to college in Missouri, studying engineering with his parents' full support and encouragement. Sarah, after declaring at age 12 that she had no interest in leaving Arkansas, became an expert horsewoman and eventually took over primary management of the ranch's livestock operations. In 1895, when Hannah was 38, she received word that Lenora had died in Little Rock. There was no apology in death, no reconciliation or healing. The lawyer handling her small estate noted that Lenora had left everything to a church, with no mention of any family. Hannah mourned not her sister exactly, but the sister she might have had if things had been different. She mourned the relationship that could have been in another life where cruelty had not poisoned the bond between them. "You forgive her?" Tyler asked as they stood in the cemetery after a brief service. Hannah thought about it honestly. "I do not know if I forgive her. But I am no longer angry. She wasted her life trying to diminish mine, and in the end, she only diminished herself. That seems like punishment enough." They left the cemetery and returned to the ranch, to the life they had built together through partnership and love, and the stubborn refusal to let anyone make them smaller than they were. By the turn of the century, Hannah and Tyler had become respected elders of the community. Their children had children of their own. James brought his wife and 2 daughters to visit from Missouri every summer, filling the house with noise and laughter. Sarah and her husband, a gentle man who worked the ranch alongside Tyler, lived in a house they had built on the eastern edge of the property, close enough for daily visits but far enough for independence. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Tyler gave Hannah a leather-bound journal with her name embossed on the cover in gold. "For your thoughts," he said. "You have always had such a brilliant mind. Seems like those thoughts should be recorded for posterity." Hannah ran her fingers over the smooth leather, touched beyond words. She had kept journals sporadically over the years, but this one was special, an acknowledgement of her intelligence from the man who had first recognized it. "Thank you," she said, kissing him, "for this and for everything." "Thank you for choosing me," Tyler replied, "for building this life with me, for being exactly who you are." That night, Hannah made the first entry in her new journal. She wrote about her journey from silence to speech, from captivity to freedom. She wrote about love and partnership, and the revolutionary act of being seen. She wrote for her children and grandchildren, a record of where they had come from, and the price that had been paid for the lives they now enjoyed. The final entry in that journal, written in Hannah's still steady hand at age 62, reflected on what she had learned across nearly 4 decades of freedom. "I was told I was slow in the mind. I was told I was less than, incapable, a burden to be managed rather than a person to be valued. And I believed it for a time, because lies told often enough begin to sound like truth. But then someone saw me, really saw me, past the lies and the reputation and the careful construct of helplessness. He saw my mind working, saw the person I was hiding, and he offered me the most radical gift imaginable: belief. Not pity, not charity, but genuine belief in my capacity and worth. That belief, and the love that grew from it, saved my life. But more than that, it taught me to save myself. To speak when silence was expected. To think when thinking was discouraged, to be fully, completely myself without apology or shame. I have lived a good life. Not an easy life always, but a true one. I have loved and been loved. I have raised children who know their worth and recognize the worth of others. I have built something lasting with a man who has been my partner in every sense of the word. If there is anything I want my descendants to know, it is this: never let anyone make you smaller than you are. Never accept anyone's assessment of your limitations as truth. And if you are blessed enough to see someone else being diminished, speak up. See them. Believe them. Sometimes that is all it takes to change a life. Tyler found the entry after Hannah died peacefully in her sleep at 63. Her heart, simply deciding it, had beat long enough. He read it through tears, then carefully placed the journal with their other important documents, a record of the extraordinary woman who had been his wife and partner for 37 years. He lived another 5 years, long enough to see his great-grandchildren born, long enough to tell them stories about their remarkable great-grandmother. When he died at 70, surrounded by family, his last words were, "I see you, Hannah. I always saw you." They were buried side by side under the oak trees near the creek where they had first truly spoken to each other. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren continued working the ranch they had built together. The story of Hannah and Tyler became family legend, passed down through generations as a reminder of the power of seeing and being seen, of partnership built on equality and respect. In Bentonville, Arkansas, a small plaque eventually appeared on the site where the Barrett sisters' house once stood, before it was torn down and replaced by a newer structure. The plaque reads simply, "Here lived Hannah Barrett Winters, educator, rancher, and advocate for women's rights. She proved that intelligence and worth cannot be silenced, only temporarily suppressed. May we all have the courage to see past lies to truth, and the strength to help others find their voices." It was a legacy born from darkness but built in light. It was a love story that began with recognition and grew through partnership. And it was, in the end, a testament to what becomes possible when someone refuses to accept another person's limitations, and instead sees them for who they truly are: brilliant, capable, worthy, and loved. Hannah Barrett had been told she was slow in the mind. Tyler Winters knew she was smarter than most men. He saw her, believed her, loved her, and together they built something that outlasted both their lives. A family founded on truth, a partnership built on equality, and a love that changed everything.